Decades ago, the world suddenly underwent a terrifying mutation. Strange cracks appeared across the planet, and from them emerged countless vicious ghost monsters. Humanity was thrown into chaos as the world entered what later became known as the mythical era. Monstrous creatures filled the skies and streets. Giant beasts, undead creatures, and horrifying ghosts attacked cities without warning. Ordinary people could do nothing but run for their lives as civilization stood on the brink of collapse. To survive, humanity began to awaken extraordinary powers. People gained unique professions and mastered powerful skills. Some became swordsmen, some became mages, archers, assassins, and countless other classes. By cultivating their abilities and increasing their ranks, they could continuously grow stronger. These awakened individuals became humanity's greatest defenders. Across the blue planet, they fought endless battles against ghost monsters and terrifying beasts. Through bloodshed and sacrifice, they carved out safe territories where humanity could continue to survive. As more powerful heroes emerged, they led mankind in resisting the invasion. Standing atop the corpses of powerful monsters, they became symbols of hope and strength. Without a doubt, the mythical era became the era of the awakened professionals. On the blue planet, within the Longsha Federation, Haicheng High School welcomed one of the most important days in a student's life, the awakening ceremony. The school grounds were filled with students as a large awakening platform glowed with mysterious runes. Standing before the crowd, combat class instructor Lu Hu announced that the ceremony was officially beginning. He reminded everyone that this day would determine their future destinies and expressed his hope that every student would awaken the profession they desired. Among the crowd stood a young man named Fang Zhou, a freshman at Haicheng High School. As he looked toward the awakening platform, he reflected on his journey. After transmigrating into this world many years ago, the day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The opportunity to awaken a profession was now right in front of him. Soon, Lu Hu called out Fang Zhou's name and ordered him to step forward. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou answered firmly and walked toward the awakening platform under the gaze of countless students. As he moved forward, whispers immediately spread through the crowd. Some students wondered what profession Fang Zhou would awaken. A few girls quietly discussed it among themselves, guessing that he would become a priest because of his calm and elegant appearance. Others quickly agreed, saying it would be a waste for someone with such handsome looks not to become a priest. While the students continued to speculate, Fang Zhou calmly approached the awakening platform, ready to discover the profession that would shape his future. As Fang Zhou approached the awakening platform, the crowd continued discussing him. Some students argued that being handsome meant nothing in the mythical era. In their eyes, awakened individuals were judged by their professions and strength, not their appearance. Others quickly agreed with that opinion. However, a few students defended Fang Zhou, saying that the critics were simply jealous of his good looks. Meanwhile, instructor Lu Hu reviewed Fang Zhou's records. According to the file, Fang Zhou was an orphan of martyrs. Not only did he possess excellent physical fitness, but his academic results were also outstanding. Looking at the information, Lu Hu understood why so many people were paying attention to him. Standing before the awakening altar, Fang Zhou calmly extended his hand and placed it on the awakening stone. The moment his hand made contact, a dazzling golden light erupted into the sky. The entire platform shook as an overwhelming energy burst outward. The spectators were stunned. Many students exclaimed that the reaction was incredibly powerful. Others wondered if Fang Zhou's awakened profession was truly going to be something heaven-defying. His admirers cheered excitedly, convinced that their idol would awaken an extraordinary profession. As everyone watched in amazement, a mysterious green energy suddenly began swirling around Fang Zhou's hand and surged outward, sweeping across the school grounds like a storm. Everyone present was stunned. Even instructor Lu Hu widened his eyes in shock. He had seen many awakenings before, but this was the first time he had witnessed someone trigger a phenomenon that affected both heaven and earth. He could not help but wonder what kind of incredible profession Fang Zhou had awakened. As the energy continued to expand, a terrifying vision appeared behind Fang Zhou. Countless undead creatures emerged from the darkness. Skeletal warriors in ancient armor stood in formation. Grim reapers carrying giant scythes loomed among the crowd. Ghostly spirits floated through the air, while horrifying undead monsters with glowing eyes filled the battlefield of shadows. Then even more powerful beings appeared. Towering skeletal kings, ancient undead rulers, and mysterious death mages stood behind Fang Zhou like loyal subjects awaiting their master's command. Their overwhelming presence made the scene look like the arrival of an undead empire. At the center of it all stood Fang Zhou, calm and expressionless as the army of death gathered behind him. Moments later, a golden notification appeared before him, announcing his successful awakening as a necromancer. Fang Zhou looked at the message in surprise, realizing that he had awakened one of the rarest and most mysterious professions in the mythical era, necromancer. Looking at the power he had awakened, he quietly wondered if this was truly his profession. Before he could think further, laughter suddenly erupted from the crowd. Several students burst out laughing. They could not stop mocking him. To them, all the grand phenomena and shocking displays had been meaningless. After making such a huge scene, Fang Zhou had only awakened as a necromancer. They pointed out that although necromancer was a rare profession, it was widely regarded as the absolute bottom among all combat classes. Some laughed even harder, saying that academic excellence had nothing to do with real combat strength. Although the profession appeared powerful on the surface, it possessed a fatal flaw. Necromancers required a sufficiently close connection to the undead realm in order to fully utilize their abilities. The problem was that life and death were naturally opposed to one another. Humans were living beings while the undead realm belonged to death itself. Because of this contradiction, establishing a connection with the undead realm was incredibly difficult. As a result, most necromancers could never unlock the true potential of their profession. No matter how impressive the awakening looked, they would remain far weaker than other combat classes. That was why the crowd viewed Fang Zhou's awakening with disappointment. To them, his spectacular entrance had ended in failure. As the crowd mocked him, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. He knew something they did not. Necromancers struggled because they could not establish a strong enough connection to the undead realm. Without that connection, their power would always remain limited. But Fang Zhou was different. Because he had awakened the undead realm experience system, for 18 long years the thing he had been waiting for had finally arrived. A glowing green orb floated into his hand as a series of new messages appeared one after another. The system announced that it had automatically connected him to the undead realm and had even generated an undead realm clone for him. According to the system, he could use this skeleton clone to explore the undead realm, devour other undead creatures, and continuously level up to become stronger. The clone could even be summoned into the real world. However, the system also issued a warning. The experience carried unknown risks and the host should proceed with caution. After reading everything, Fang Zhou's eyes lit up. He immediately understood the value of what he had obtained. For ordinary necromancers, the greatest obstacle was finding a way to connect with the undead realm. Most spent their entire lives unable to overcome that limitation, but this system had solved that problem from the very beginning. As he held the glowing orb in his hand and felt the undead energy surrounding him, Fang Zhou smiled faintly. To him, this system was practically tailor-made for a necromancer. What everyone else considered the weakest profession had suddenly become a path filled with limitless possibilities. A faint smile appeared on Fang Zhou's face. Without hesitation, he activated the system. In an instant, his consciousness connected to a powerful skeleton standing within the undead realm. The skeleton looked down at its own body as Fang Zhou quickly realized that this was the clone created for him by the system. A notification immediately appeared. Before summoning the clone into reality, he could temporarily possess it and personally experience the undead realm through its eyes. The skeleton clone could devour other undead creatures to strengthen its own attributes. Any undead creature slain by the clone could later be summoned by Fang Zhou to fight for him in the real world. Fang Zhou's eyes brightened. If that was true, then as long as he killed enough undead creatures, he would gain an endless army of summons. At that moment, he gazed across the vast and desolate undead realm. Beneath a blood-red moon, countless opportunities awaited him. To Fang Zhou, the entire undead realm had become his personal hunting ground. However, he quickly calmed himself. There would be plenty of time to explore the undead realm later. For now, he decided to save the undead realm experience for another day. Returning his focus to the present, Fang Zhou issued a command to the system. He ordered it to immediately summon the skeleton clone into the real world. The system immediately responded to Fang Zhou's command. It acknowledged the order and began summoning the skeleton clone into the real world. A brilliant green magic circle appeared beneath him, glowing with mysterious runes and overflowing with undead energy. Moments later, a tall skeleton stepped out from the center of the formation. Dark energy swirled around its body as blue flames burned within its eyes. The clone had successfully arrived in reality. Fang Zhou examined it carefully and quickly came to a conclusion. Unlike ordinary summons, this skeleton clone could be directly summoned into the real world at any time. More importantly, it was currently his strongest summon. Just then, the examiner's voice echoed across the field as he called the next student forward. At the same time, the examiner could not help but sigh inwardly. Fang Zhou had clearly shown great talent, yet he had awakened as a necromancer. To him, it felt like a waste of such potential. Meanwhile, several students approached Fang Zhou. Instead of mocking him like the others, they tried to encourage him. One girl told him not to be discouraged. She said that even as a necromancer, she believed he could one day achieve a legendary crown and become someone extraordinary. Another student stared curiously at the skeleton standing beside him. With excitement in her voice, she asked whether that was the skeleton he had summoned. Looking at the imposing undead warrior, she admitted that it looked incredibly cool. As Fang Zhou stood with his skeleton summon, several jealous students watched from a distance. One of them complained bitterly, wondering why girls were still gathering around Fang Zhou even after he had awakened such a supposedly useless profession. Another grumbled that being handsome seemed to let him do whatever he wanted. The blonde young man scoffed and claimed that Fang Zhou could only summon a skeleton. In his eyes, there was no way a single skeleton could be stronger than an assassin. Then a thought crossed his mind. He remembered hearing that novice necromancers could only summon a few skeletons each year. If that skeleton were destroyed, Fang Zhou's leveling speed would be severely affected. So, without warning, he activated a skill called Silent Sleeve Arrow. A hidden arrow shot from his sleeve and streaked silently toward the skeleton summon. However, the skeleton was no ordinary undead. The moment the attack approached, its blue eyes flashed. It instantly detected the incoming threat and turned its head toward the attacker. In that instant, the undead warrior moved to eliminate the one who had dared to attack it. The blonde student stared in confusion. Just a moment ago, the skeleton had been standing beside Fang Zhou, but now it had completely vanished. Before he could understand what had happened, a black blur flashed across the battlefield. The skeleton clone had already crossed the distance between them. Its blue eyes burned with cold, killing intent as it appeared directly beside him. The blonde student's expression froze. He barely had time to turn his head before a skeletal hand slammed into his face. Blood sprayed from the corner of his mouth as the tremendous force sent him reeling backward. The skeleton showed no mercy. Gripping a massive bone club, it swung the weapon down with terrifying strength. The blonde student cried out in panic as the bone club smashed into him and launched him across the ground. Dust exploded into the air while nearby students stumbled back in shock. The blonde student crashed to the ground and stared in disbelief. His face was swollen from the hit, and cold sweat ran down his forehead. He could not understand what had just happened. Struggling to his feet, he looked toward Fang Zhou and the skeleton clone, with shock still written all over his face. At that moment, Fang Zhou calmly questioned his actions and asked what exactly he had been trying to do. The blonde student gritted his teeth and covered his injured cheek. His body trembled slightly from both pain and frustration. Inwardly, he cursed his bad luck. He had never expected Fang Zhou's skeleton to be so formidable. Not only was it incredibly fast, but it had even detected an attack launched from a blind spot and reacted before it could land. The more he thought about it, the more unbelievable it seemed. As a skeleton mage, Fang Zhou should have relied entirely on his summons. No matter how powerful the skeleton was, Fang Zhou's own body should not have been strong. If the summon was too difficult to deal with, then perhaps targeting the summoner himself would be the better option. After all, a mage without his summon should be far easier to handle. So, without thinking, the blonde student made his move. Believing that Fang Zhou himself was the weak point, he leaped forward with a hidden blade in hand and shouted for Fang Zhou to die. The sharp weapon shot straight toward Fang Zhou's head at incredible speed. However, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. At the last moment, he casually raised his hand and caught the incoming blade with 2 fingers. His expression did not change in the slightest. The blonde student's eyes widened in horror. Before he could react, Fang Zhou seized his arm and pulled him off balance. The student let out a panicked scream as his attack completely failed. Looking at him coldly, Fang Zhou spoke in a calm voice, saying that he had greatly overestimated his own abilities. Green-black energy crackled around Fang Zhou's body as he tightened his grip. In the next instant, Fang Zhou launched a powerful counterattack. His fist slammed directly into the blonde student's body with tremendous force. The impact exploded like a cannon blast. The blonde student was sent flying across the field, completely unable to resist. His body tumbled through the air as the crowd watched in stunned silence. What he had believed would be an easy assassination had instead turned into a one-sided defeat. Lu Renjia's body spun through the air before crashing heavily onto the ground. The impact stunned everyone nearby. The surrounding students stared in shock, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Lu Renjia lay on the grass, blood splattered around him, his eyes were wide open, and his mind had gone completely blank. He could not understand how he had been defeated so easily. Fang Zhou glanced at him indifferently. To him, the fight had been nothing more than a waste of time. He casually remarked that the battle had been boring and that he was leaving. With that, Fang Zhou turned around and began walking away as if nothing had happened. Not long after, Instructor Lu Hu approached the scene after hearing the commotion. He looked around in confusion and asked what had happened. One student quickly explained that Lu Renjia had tried to launch a sneak attack on Fang Zhou but had ended up being instantly defeated. Another added that Fang Zhou had taken him down with a single punch. The crowd became even more shocked after hearing that. Everyone knew that necromancers were supposed to have weak physical bodies and relied mainly on their summons. Yet Lu Renjia had not even managed to defeat Fang Zhou himself. After being helped to his feet by a few classmates, Lu Renjia glared in the direction Fang Zhou had left. His body was covered in injuries, and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Gritting his teeth, he muttered Fang Zhou's name under his breath. The humiliation of being defeated so thoroughly burned inside him. Staring ahead with bloodshot eyes, Lu Renjia clenched his fists and roared that Fang Zhou should just wait. He swore that he would repay today's humiliation someday. Meanwhile, Fang Zhou had already left the noisy crowd behind. He returned to the school building and walked through the empty hallway. Looking around, he confirmed that no one was nearby to disturb him. Fang Zhou calmly called for the system to appear. A moment later, eerie green energy gathered in front of him. A dark undead aura swirled through the air as a strange interface materialized before his eyes. Fang Zhou looked at the floating screen and calmly stated that it was finally time to experience the undead realm. The system immediately responded and asked whether the host wished to begin the undead realm experience. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou prepared to enter the mysterious realm and uncover the opportunities waiting for him there. He knew that the undead realm experience would allow him to understand the undead realm far better. For every necromancer, this was a mandatory trial. If fortune favored him, he might even be able to devour other undead creatures and absorb their power. There was no faster way for a necromancer to grow stronger. However, he remained cautious. He wondered whether everything would really go as smoothly as he hoped. The undead realm was filled with dangerous creatures. In that place, it was impossible to know who would become the hunter and who would become the prey. Still, Fang Zhou understood one truth. Risks and rewards always existed together. After making up his mind, he looked at the system and firmly ordered it to begin the undead realm experience. The system immediately responded and asked him to wait a moment. Dark green energy continued to swirl around the room as Fang Zhou stood calmly in the center. He thought about how he had waited 18 long years for the system to appear. There was no way he would waste such a precious chance to become stronger. A short while later, the system completed its preparations. A new message appeared before him, warning that the undead realm experience carried an unknown level of danger. It asked whether he wished to proceed. Without the slightest hesitation, Fang Zhou selected confirm. The moment his choice was made, the surrounding undead energy erupted. A strange green light filled the room, and a mysterious magic circle appeared beneath his feet. Suddenly, Fang Zhou sensed something unusual. His eyes widened slightly as the dark energy around him twisted and surged, signaling that the journey into the terrifying undead realm was about to begin. A moment later, Fang Zhou appeared within this strange realm. He stood silently and observed his surroundings. Jagged mountains rose in the distance beneath the eerie red moon, while dark mist drifted across the wasteland. For a brief moment, he remained speechless. Then he noticed something familiar. The place looked exactly like the environment where he had previously summoned his skeleton warrior. Realizing this, he wondered if this was truly the undead realm experience the system had mentioned. As he examined the situation, a green system panel appeared before him, displaying information about his current body. He had entered the undead realm in the form of a skeleton clone. The clone's rank was apprentice, and all of its attributes were at the lowest level. Its strength, constitution, agility, and spirit were all only 1 point. It possessed no equipment and only one racial skill. The skill was called skeletal armament. According to the system, it was an instinct unique to the skeleton race. Through this ability, a skeleton could use bones to strengthen itself and forge equipment from them. At the same time, Fang Zhou carefully examined the information panel and focused on the skeleton's only racial skill. It was an innate ability called skeletal armament. As he read the description, he quickly realized that this was the same ability his summoned skeleton had used before. Through this instinctive skill, skeletons could use bones to strengthen themselves and even forge weapons and equipment. Understanding its value, Fang Zhou immediately decided to make use of it. In a place as dangerous as the undead realm, entering battle unarmed would be foolish. To improve his chances of survival, he concluded that forging a weapon before encountering any enemies was the safest choice. The skeleton clone began gathering bones and preparing to create its first weapon. However, just as Fang Zhou was making his preparations, danger arrived far sooner than expected. A sudden warning filled his mind. A ferocious wolf-like creature burst out from the shadows with terrifying speed. Its mouth was wide open, revealing rows of sharp fangs as it lunged directly toward the skeleton. Fang Zhou was caught completely off guard. He immediately leaped backward and narrowly avoided the wolf's claws. Looking at the beast, he realized that the undead realm was indeed filled with hidden dangers. Before he could fully recover, the two-headed wolf launched another fierce assault. Fang Zhou tried to dodge, but his foot became tangled at the worst possible moment. Seeing the wolf rushing toward him, he remained calm and muttered that if that was the case, then he had another idea. In an instant, he swung his body and pulled the skeleton from the ground that had become tangled around his foot. He then kicked the skeleton's head, sending it flying straight toward the wolf's head. The beast simply shook its head and continued glaring at him with its crimson eyes. Fang Zhou stared in disbelief as cold sweat ran down his skull. Seeing this, he realized that the kick had absolutely no effect at all. Fang Zhou struggled to keep up as the two-headed wolf continuously attacked from different directions. Every movement felt awkward, and he quickly realized that controlling a skeleton's body was much harder than he had imagined. The wolf kept circling and launching relentless assaults. He dodged as best as he could, but he knew things could not continue like this. While retreating, his eyes suddenly landed on a nearby pile of bones. A plan immediately formed in his mind. At that moment, blue energy surged around the scattered bones. The pile of bones instantly flew together and merged into a massive skeletal weapon. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou swung it forward and shouted for the beast to die. The attack slammed directly into the wolf, sending a powerful impact through its body. However, the two-headed wolf was far tougher than expected. It snarled fiercely and pushed forward despite the hit. Fang Zhou continued fighting at close range, circling the beast and striking from multiple directions. The battle grew increasingly intense as claws, fangs, and bone weapons collided again and again. Suddenly, back in the real world, Fang Zhou realized something after being attacked by the wolf. The injuries suffered inside the undead realm were also transferred to reality. He concluded that this mysterious system was far more dangerous than he had originally imagined. However, he quickly shifted his attention back to the battle. Since one wolf head was already dead, there was no reason to let it go to waste. The skeleton raised a hand toward the corpse and issued a command. Dark energy surged forward and wrapped around the dead wolf head. At the same time, the skill skeletal armament activated once more. He grabbed the dead wolf head and transformed it into long skeletal chains. The chains shot through the air like living serpents and coiled around the wolf's body. The beast immediately struggled and roared furiously, trying to break free. Blood splattered as the chains tightened around it from every direction. The chains whipped through the battlefield repeatedly, slashing and piercing the wolf's body over and over. Each strike left fresh wounds across its fur and flesh. After defeating the two-headed wolf, Fang Zhou looked at its corpse and evaluated the battle. He admitted that skeletal armament was even more useful than he had expected. As a skill granted by the mysterious system, its versatility far exceeded his initial assumptions. Just as he was reflecting on the fight, a strange blue flame suddenly rose from the wolf's corpse. The eerie flame hovered above the dead beast, pulsing with an unusual energy. The moment he saw it, a powerful sensation surged through him, an overwhelming hunger. The feeling struck so suddenly that it caught him off guard. He could not understand why he desired the flame so badly. Then, as if responding to his instinct, a thought emerged deep within his consciousness. Eat it. Devour. Power. Evolve. The words echoed repeatedly in his mind. The hunger consumed his thoughts. Finally, he raised his hand and pulled the blue flame toward himself. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth and swallowed the mysterious soul-like fire in a single gulp. After swallowing the blue soul flame, Fang Zhou felt a surge of energy flow through his body. A green system notification immediately appeared before him. The newly absorbed power was quickly converted into his attributes. His strength, constitution, agility, and spirit attributes all increased slightly. He concluded that this was likely one of the effects granted by skeletal armament. Just then he received another notification telling him that his soul power had also increased slightly. Fang Zhou stared at the new stat with curiosity and wondered what soul power could actually do. The system quickly provided an explanation. Soul power was converted from soul energy and had many different uses. It could be used to deduce and develop skills, increase one's potential, and even enhance equipment. In other words, the path forward was simple. As long as he continued hunting and gathering soul energy, he could keep growing stronger without stopping. After learning how the system worked, Fang Zhou looked across the desolate undead land and felt a surge of excitement. A realization flashed through his mind. He could grow infinitely. As long as he kept hunting and gathering soul energy, there seemed to be no limit to how strong he could become. While he was thinking, movement suddenly caught his attention. A ragged skeleton warrior approached from the distance. The system immediately displayed its information. It was a basic skeleton, the cannon fodder commonly summoned by necromancers. It was only an apprentice-level undead creature. Its body was fragile, it possessed no intelligence, and its greatest weakness was the soul fire burning inside its skull. Seeing that, Fang Zhou immediately became interested. He activated skeletal armament once more and successfully forged a piece of equipment, Bone Spear. Without hesitation, he rushed forward and struck. The enemy skeleton was blown away by the attack before it could even react. As the blue soul fire was absorbed, his agility and soul power increased slightly. Seeing this, Fang Zhou's eyes glowed brighter. The increase confirmed his theory. Every undead creature he hunted could become nourishment for his growth. He continued his assault without slowing down. His spear pierced through another skeleton, shattering its bones. The moment its soul fire was devoured, the system rewarded him again. He started to feel his body becoming stronger with every kill. His path was becoming clearer and clearer. Every enemy he defeated was merely another stepping stone toward evolution. After countless battles, Fang Zhou stood amid piles of broken bones. Blue soul fire flickered within his eyes as he examined his current status. His attributes had risen significantly. Strength 3, Agility 2, Constitution 2, Spirit 2, Soul Power 10. Yet instead of being satisfied, he shook his head. This level of power was still far from enough. He could become even stronger. As that thought echoed through his mind, the scene suddenly shifted to reality. At Haicheng High School, Fang Zhou was standing quietly, still immersed in thoughts of becoming stronger and continuing his endless path of growth. Just as he was thinking, a familiar voice suddenly interrupted him. His classmate Bei Xiaoshen saw him standing in the empty hallway. She looked at him and asked what he was doing there. Startled, Fang Zhou snapped out of his thoughts and turned toward the source of the voice. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Standing before him was Bei Xiaoshen. After recognizing her, he asked in confusion why she was there. Bai Xiaochen stared at him nervously. Her eyes soon fell on the bloodstain on his hand and she immediately became worried. She hesitated before speaking. Even if the profession he had awakened was not ideal, he should not hurt himself just to vent his frustration. Fang Zhou was stunned. He had no idea how she had arrived at such a conclusion. At that moment, he realized that Bai Xiaochen had completely misunderstood the situation. The injury on his hand had nothing to do with self-harm. Unable to explain the truth, Fang Zhou could only sigh inwardly. He thought that the next time he entered the undead realm, he would have to find a quieter place where no one could disturb him. Trying to calm her concerns, he casually told her that he was fine and that the wound was only a small scratch caused by carelessness. Bai Xiaoshan looked at him doubtfully and asked if that was really true. Fang Zhou nodded and reassured her again. After a brief silence, he changed the subject. He reminded her that meditation class was about to begin and that they should hurry back to class. Bai Xiaochen immediately agreed. The two of them then walked down the corridor together toward their classroom. As Fang Zhou and Bai Xiaochen walked through the corridor, Fang Zhou suddenly coughed. His body swayed slightly, causing Bai Xiaochen's expression to change immediately. She hurried to his side and grabbed his arm, telling him that he was obviously not fine. She insisted on taking him to the infirmary. Fang Zhou quickly reassured her that he was all right, but inwardly he finally understood what was happening. Entering the undead realm seemed to place a certain burden on his body. At that moment, a green notification screen appeared before him. It informed him that he had spent too much time in the undead realm today and warned him to pay attention to his physical condition. Seeing the message, Fang Zhou's eyes widened slightly. Then another discovery caught his attention. His own attributes had increased as well. His skills now included Summon Skeleton and a mysterious new ability called Deducible Skill. While Bai Xiaochen stood beside him, still worried and asking whether he was truly okay, Fang Zhou's attention remained fixed on the new skill. He stared at the words Deducible Skill and began to think, could this ability allow him to do what only the most powerful awakened individuals could do? A bold idea suddenly appeared in his mind. Perhaps he could use this skill not only to learn abilities but also to create entirely new ones. The possibility filled him with excitement. Fang Zhou clenched his fists, thinking that if his guess was correct, then his future potential might be far greater than he had ever imagined. He might one day create his own unique skills and walk a path unlike anyone else's. Sometime later, at Haicheng High School's teaching building, the students gathered inside a large lecture hall for their first meditation class. A woman with long red hair stepped onto the stage and introduced herself. Her name was Shen Hongyu, and she was the instructor responsible for teaching meditation. She was a silver lower rank fire mage. With a wave of her hand, glowing books appeared on the students' desks. Shen Hongyu explained that the book contained the basic meditation method corresponding to their professions. She instructed everyone to use meditation to display their professional abilities. She then explained that meditation could increase spirit power, which served as the foundation for using professional skills. However, she told the students not to be anxious if they failed at first. According to her, it was completely normal. She even boasted that, despite being a genius, it had taken her half a month of training just to barely reach that stage. Fang Zhou remained silent as he listened to her words. At that moment, a system notification suddenly appeared before his eyes, telling him that the system had detected a learnable skill, Skeleton Meditation Method. It could be quickly deduced to the entry stage. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou reached out and selected yes. The learning process immediately began. As soon as the learning process started, green streams of energy surged around Fang Zhou. Strange symbols surrounded his body as the skeleton meditation method was rapidly absorbed into his mind. In an instant, Fang Zhou's consciousness merged with a skeleton clone, and he successfully learned the skill, Skeleton Meditation Method. Fang Zhou was surprised by how quickly he had mastered it. Just then, another description appeared. Skeleton Meditation Method. Apprentice-level entry stage. A basic meditation method for necromancers that slowly increases the spirit attribute by visualizing a skeleton. After reading the explanation, Fang Zhou was not surprised at all. To ordinary people, visualizing a skeleton might be difficult, but for him, it was no different from looking at his own skeleton clone. Fang Zhou quickly realized another advantage. As long as he did not enter the undead realm experience, the skeleton clone would continue meditating automatically. In other words, he could cultivate 24 hours a day without stopping. He immediately understood that this was one of the benefits granted by the system's innate necromancer holy body. Just then, another system notification appeared. Host spirit ability has increased. You may enter the undead realm experience again. Fang Zhou narrowed his eyes. He knew that entering the undead realm consumed spirit power. Because of that, he could not afford to neglect the training of either his main body or his skeleton clone. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou made his decision. He quickly entered the undead realm. After entering the undead realm once again, Fang Zhou's skeleton clone immediately resumed hunting within the barren land of death. The clone charged across the battlefield and struck down undead creatures one after another with its bone weapon. Watching the gains accumulate, Fang Zhou felt a surge of excitement. He realized that he could once again hunt to his heart's content and steadily grow stronger. Soon a system notification appeared before him, telling him that a clone skill had reached proficiency. It can be used as skill material to deduce an unknown skill for the main body. Estimated cost, 10 points of soul power. Fang Zhou's eyes narrowed in interest. He remembered the system mentioning skill deduction before. It seemed that the deduction process had to be performed inside the undead realm. Without wasting any time, he decided to test it. Immediately, green flames surged around the system interface. A mysterious symbol appeared as the system began analyzing the available materials. The deduction process continued for several moments while the progress bar steadily advanced. At last, the result appeared. Skill deduction successful. A brand new skill was born. Bone Javelin. The system displayed its description. Bone Javelin, apprentice level, proficient, condenses a bone javelin and throws it at enemies. It deals both armor-piercing physical damage and death energy damage. Its quantity, power, and range depend on the user's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. Fang Zhou looked at the newly acquired skill and immediately smiled. The bone javelin perfectly matched the weapon his skeleton clone had been using all along. After obtaining the bone javelin skill, Fang Zhou discovered that it came with an entire derivative skill tree. At the top of the tree was bone javelin, and beneath it were several advanced branches, including bone shield, giant bone claw, and bone prison. Seeing this, Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He had not expected the skill to provide an entire evolution path. However, after examining it more closely, he realized that unlocking those advanced skills would require much more soul power. For now, all he could do was continue accumulating soul power through hunting. While thinking about his next steps, Fang Zhou suddenly noticed something unusual. Not far away, several undead skeletons were wandering across the wasteland. The moment they sensed his presence, they appeared terrified and tried to flee. Fang Zhou's eyes lit up. A smile spread across his skeletal face. Since suitable targets had appeared on their own, he could use them to test his newly acquired skill. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou activated Bone Javelin, a gigantic bone spear condensed in the air, wrapped in blue death energy. The javelin shot forward like a bolt of lightning and slammed into the ground among the fleeing skeletons. The impact was devastating. The earth cracked apart as the undead creatures were instantly shattered into piles of broken bones. After witnessing the result, Fang Zhou nodded in satisfaction. The power of Bone Javelin far exceeded ordinary apprentice-level skills such as Death Missile and Ray of Enfeeblement. Its destructive force was clearly on a completely different level. After testing Bone Javelin, Fang Zhou noticed something unexpected. The rewards from defeating the weak skeletons had decreased significantly. When he checked his status, he realized that his attributes were not rising like before. Fang Zhou quickly understood what was happening. The system was clearly preventing him from endlessly farming weak undead for easy growth. If he wanted larger rewards, he would have to venture deeper into the more dangerous regions of the undead realm. However, before doing that, there was still something important he needed to obtain: bone essence. Until he acquired enough bone essence, he would continue hunting and devouring these low-level undead to strengthen himself. Back in the real world, Fang Zhou sat quietly in the classroom while his consciousness remained focused on the undead realm. As he watched his strength steadily increase, a grin slowly appeared on his face. A faint chuckle escaped him. The sound immediately caught Shen Hongyu's attention. Curious, teacher Shen Hongyu walked over and gently tapped his shoulder, calling out to him. Fang Zhou snapped back to reality. Shen Hongyu frowned slightly and asked why everyone else was concentrating on meditation while he was sitting there giggling to himself. Fang Zhou awkwardly opened his mouth, unsure how to explain. Before he could answer, another student suddenly spoke up. The student confidently declared that he knew the reason. In his opinion, Fang Zhou had simply failed to enter a meditative state. Another student questioned that conclusion, pointing out that rare professions were supposed to have superior meditation effects. A classmate immediately corrected him, explaining that it depended on the specific rare profession. He then added that very few people had ever awakened as necromancers. Because of that, the skeleton meditation method available to necromancers was rumored to be incomplete. As a result, it would not be surprising if Fang Zhou found it difficult or even impossible to enter a meditative state. Hearing everyone discuss him as if he had failed, Fang Zhou could only remain silent. Teacher Shen looked at Fang Zhou with a serious expression and told him that she understood meditation was difficult for his profession. However, she warned him not to give up on himself so easily. She then pointed out that because he was the only student not seriously trying, the entire class was having its time wasted. To make her point, she gestured toward Li Renjia. She praised him for his hard work, saying that in just a single class, he had already meditated enough to materialize the handle of a knife. Li Renjia smiled modestly and thanked Teacher Shen for the compliment. Even so, he claimed that he had only comprehended about 1/3 of the meditation method so far. According to him, his cultivation speed was merely at the level of an average genius. Then he turned toward Fang Zhou with a smug look and said that Fang Zhou should now understand the gap between a necromancer and other professions. Hearing that, Fang Zhou let out a faint chuckle. He calmly replied that such a speed was indeed very average. The entire classroom fell silent. Li Renjia's eyes widened in disbelief. He could hardly believe what he had just heard. Recovering from the shock, he immediately pointed at Fang Zhou and angrily declared that Fang Zhou could not even enter a meditative state. He told him to look at his own situation before bragging. At that moment, Fang Zhou released a terrifying aura that made the atmosphere turn cold and oppressive. Li Renjia's expression instantly changed. The arrogance on his face disappeared as fear took its place. Instinctively, he stepped back. The overwhelming presence looming behind Fang Zhou made it clear that he was not someone to be taken lightly. Teacher Shen quickly called out to Li Renjia, telling him to focus his mind and calm down. Then she turned toward Fang Zhou with a displeased expression and asked what he thought he was doing. She reminded him that this was a meditation class meant for learning meditation, not a place for aggressive brawling. Any fighting could wait until combat class. Fang Zhou calmly rested a hand on the desk and explained that he had only wanted Li Renjia to step aside. A faint smile appeared on his face as he continued speaking. He said he simply wanted to show Teacher Shen his meditation progress. The classroom immediately became restless. A silver-haired girl stared at him in surprise and wondered if Fang Zhou had actually succeeded in meditation. Even if he had, she thought he should have only completed around 1/10 of the entry stage at most. Meanwhile, many students looked toward Fang Zhou with curiosity and doubt. Ignoring everyone's reactions, Fang Zhou slowly activated the technique. Skeleton meditation method. In the next instant, dark energy erupted from his body. Black streams of power surged upward like countless shadowy tendrils, filling the classroom with a chilling aura. Powerful waves of energy spread in every direction, causing the air itself to tremble. The students could only stare in shock as the dark currents continued to rise around Fang Zhou. Teacher Shen also stared at Fang Zhou in disbelief. She could hardly understand how it was possible. In the span of a single class, Fang Zhou had actually reached the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method. Fang Zhou stood calmly beneath the giant skeleton and casually thought that, at this speed, compared to an average genius, he should be at least 100 million times better. At that moment, Instructor Lu Hu suddenly stepped forward. After observing Fang Zhou's aura, he admitted that Fang Zhou's progress with the meditation method was quite impressive. Then, to everyone's surprise, he announced that there would be a test the next day. The announcement immediately caused an uproar throughout the classroom. Several students jumped to their feet in shock. Some wondered if they were already going to have combat class, while others complained that they had not even reached the entry stage of their own meditation methods yet. As the room buzzed with complaints, Li Renjia narrowed his eyes and looked toward Fang Zhou. A cold smile appeared on his face. He reminded Fang Zhou that combat class was completely different from meditation. In the field he excelled at, he intended to show everyone the difference between them. Inwardly mocking Fang Zhou as nothing more than a weak chicken mage, Li Renjia looked forward to seeing how long Fang Zhou could keep up his confident act once the real fighting began. Meanwhile, in the desolate lands of the undead realm, Fang Zhou moved through the Crimson Wasteland surrounded by dark flames and eerie undead energy. After reaching the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method, Fang Zhou noticed that the amount of time it could remain inside the undead realm had increased significantly. Even so, it had no intention of slowing down. Fang Zhou clenched its weapon and reminded itself that it could not afford to slack off. Its spirit power was limited, and before it was exhausted, it needed to hunt and destroy as many undead creatures as possible. Filled with determination, Fang Zhou charged forward. Its glowing blue eyes burned with fighting spirit as it shouted for more enemies. Like a black whirlwind, it rushed into the horde. It swung its weapon with tremendous force, striking an undead creature head-on. A powerful impact exploded across the battlefield as another enemy was cut down, while the skeleton continued its relentless hunt through the undead realm. Fang Zhou tore through the battlefield like an unstoppable storm. Bones shattered and dust filled the air wherever it passed. Looking at the countless undead falling before it, the skeleton realized that it could kill even more enemies than before. After another fierce round of slaughter, it finally slowed down. White mist escaped from its mouth as it tightened its grip on its weapon. The battlefield around it was covered with broken bones and shattered remains. Standing among the piles of corpses, it examined its condition and concluded that its spirit power was nearly exhausted for the day. Continuing to fight any longer would be difficult. Just then, a system screen suddenly appeared before its eyes, informing it that its professional level had increased, and that its accompanying skeleton clone could now be strengthened. Seeing the message, Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. It realized that all of its hard work had not been in vain. Without hesitation, it selected the confirmation option. The moment the choice was made, a surge of dark green energy erupted around its body. A powerful undead aura swirled through the air as mysterious symbols and lightning-like energy gathered around the skeleton. The clone upgrade process immediately began, and the surrounding undead energy rushed toward it like a tide. As the upgrade process continued, streams of green energy flowed into the skeleton's body. The blue flames within its eyes burned brighter, and a powerful aura spread from every bone in its body. Soon, the results of the upgrade appeared before it. The skeleton clone had successfully advanced to the middle apprentice rank. Its strength, constitution, agility, spirit, and soul power had all improved. It also retained its bone spear and skeletal armament abilities. Most importantly, the upgrade had granted it a brand new skill, Brutal Strike. The notification explained that Brutal Strike was an apprentice-level entry-stage skill. It allowed the user to unleash an instant burst of immense power against an enemy. The strength of the attack depended on the user's strength attribute and skill proficiency. Fang Zhou was delighted by the discovery. It had never expected that upgrading could directly grant new skills. After reading the description, it became even more satisfied. With Brutal Strike, hunting undead creatures would become much faster and more efficient. However, while studying the new skill, its body suddenly trembled. A blue glow flickered around it as weakness washed over its bones. Only then did it realize its mistake. It had been so focused on examining the newly acquired skill that it had forgotten its spirit power was already overdrawn. The exhaustion hit immediately, forcing it to stop. The next moment, its consciousness began to fade from the undead realm. When it opened its eyes again, it had returned to the sports field of Haicheng High School. Fang Zhou suddenly felt a sharp headache the moment he returned from the undead realm. He held his head and grimaced in pain. His spirit power was still far too low, and the backlash from overusing it left him feeling terrible. Noticing his condition, Bai Xiaochen approached him with concern. She asked what was wrong, pointing out that ever since the meditation class, he had looked exhausted every day. Fang Zhou forced a smile and told her that he was fine. He explained that he had simply been practicing for too long every day. However, deep down he knew that the system and the existence of the undead realm could never be revealed to anyone. From now on, he decided that he would only enter the undead realm when he was alone. Just then, a mocking voice sounded nearby. Lu Renjia sneered that necromancers were truly a worthless profession. In his opinion, Fang Zhou had become so weak simply from meditating a little longer. He added that even if Fang Zhou had reached the entry stage of the meditation method, it meant nothing. A profession could only prove itself through strength. Hearing this, Bai Xiaochen immediately became angry and told him that he was going too far. She questioned why he was always targeting Fang Zhou when Fang Zhou had never offended him. Lu Renjia merely shrugged and claimed that he was only speaking the truth. Fang Zhou looked at him calmly and asked if Lu Renjia wanted another beating. A cold light flashed across Lu Renjia's eyes. He replied that he was no longer the same person he had been a week ago. He proudly announced that he had already learned a professional skill. With that skill, he claimed he would only need a single move to defeat Fang Zhou. Just as the tension was about to explode, a loud voice interrupted them. Teacher Lu arrived and ordered everyone to stop immediately. He reminded the students that the school's purpose was to teach them skills to kill vicious ghosts in the future, not to fight among themselves. Lu Renjia immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Teacher Lu then turned toward Fang Zhou. He acknowledged Fang Zhou's excellent meditation class results but reminded him that combat classes were equally important and required just as much effort. Fang Zhou nodded and agreed. As Teacher Lu walked away, Fang Zhou watched his back thoughtfully. He could not help feeling that Teacher Lu seemed to be intentionally looking out for him. Teacher Lu suddenly raised his voice and ordered all the students to assemble on the sports field. The students immediately responded and rushed over to gather in formation. After everyone had arrived, Teacher Lu instructed an assistant to bring the equipment forward. Moments later, a large object covered with a cloth was wheeled onto the field. The students looked at it curiously. When the cloth was removed, a strange mechanical golem with horns was revealed. Teacher Lu introduced it as an apprentice-level test golem. He explained that it was specifically designed to measure a student's attack and defense capabilities, using the weakest standard combat unit of the Abyss Demons, the Imp, as a reference. The golem's attack power and defense power were both set at 100. According to Teacher Lu, a defense value of 100 was enough to withstand the Imp's sharp claws head-on. Looking at the somewhat battered machine, one of the students questioned whether it might be broken by the students during testing. Teacher Lu laughed and firmly stated that no new student had ever managed to destroy one of these test golems. He then made a bold announcement. If any student could dismantle a golem using their own strength during today's test, he, Lu Hu, would personally apply for a reward of 20 alliance contribution points on that student's behalf. The moment those words were spoken, the entire crowd erupted with excitement. Many students were stunned that Teacher Lu was willing to offer 20 alliance contribution points so casually. Others immediately became motivated, laughing and declaring that they finally had a reason to give it their all during the test. Fang Zhou silently recalled that in this world, contribution points functioned as a circulating currency. They were required to purchase equipment, resources, and even valuable skills. Because of that, the promise of 20 contribution points was enough to make every student excited. The students immediately began volunteering for the test. One after another, they raised their hands and asked for a chance to go first. Teacher Lu told everyone to line up and announced that the testing would begin with the common professions. The first student stepped forward, a fire element user. Flames wrapped around his body as he formed a spell and unleashed a blazing fireball toward the test golem. The explosion looked impressive, but when the smoke cleared, Teacher Lu calmly announced the result. The student's attack capability was only 48, and he still needed much more practice. The student was stunned. He had clearly felt considerable power behind the attack and could not understand how the score had ended up so low. After him, more students took their turns. A swordsman rushed forward and unleashed a powerful crippling strike, earning a score of 41. Soon afterward, an archer fired a petrifying arrow and achieved a score of 50. One by one, the common profession students completed their tests, but none of them managed to produce an outstanding result. When the final common profession student finished, Teacher Lu announced that all common profession testing had ended. The remaining special profession students could now come forward in order. The students immediately began discussing the results among themselves. One student sighed and pointed out that none of the common professions had managed to reach a score of 60. Another finally understood why Teacher Lu had been so generous with the reward. There was simply no way ordinary students could earn those 20 contribution points. As the crowd continued talking, some began looking toward the special profession students with anticipation. They could not help but wonder what kind of scores those rare and powerful hidden professions would achieve. Fang Zhou quietly watched the ongoing tests and wondered whether the test golem could calculate the combined strength of both a summoner and their summoned creatures. Before he could think further, Lu Renjia walked over and mocked him, claiming that his attack power was probably among the lowest in the class. To prove his superiority, Lu Renjia rushed toward the test golem and unleashed his newly learned skill, Phantom Dagger. A crimson arc slashed through the air and struck the golem, earning him a score of 80 attack power. Teacher Lu announced the result, and Lu Renjia immediately boasted about the strength of his hidden profession, the Phantom Assassin, only for Bai Xiaochen to remind him that he was not the only student with a hidden profession. The examination continued as Yefan stepped forward for his test. Since he had awakened the rare Demon Hunter profession and had even attracted the attention of the Academy's upper management, many students eagerly watched to see his performance. Green energy surged around him as he summoned a demonic blade and launched Vengeance Strike, producing an initial score of 65. While the crowd was confused by the seemingly average result, Yefan calmly continued attacking. The score rapidly climbed from 65 to 88 and finally reached 100 after a powerful finishing strike. Instructor Lu Hu immediately announced the result, earning Yefan the admiration of the surrounding students. Watching from the side, Fang Zhou finally understood how the test worked. The golem did not measure only the power of a single attack, it calculated cumulative damage as well. A faint smile appeared on his face. If cumulative damage counted toward the final score, then achieving an outstanding result would be easy for him. After all, his true strength did not lie in one powerful attack but in the endless assaults of his summoned skeleton army. Looking across the training ground, Ye Fan judged the situation calmly. From what he could see, it seemed that no one in the class could surpass him. Confident in himself, he believed there was no opponent there who could stand above him. However, after seeing the results, someone clicked his tongue in frustration. He complained that the score had only been achieved by stacking attacks, and if he had known that earlier, he would have attacked a few more times as well. Hearing that, Bai Xiaochen questioned where an assassin like him would even get a combo skill. Soon after, the instructor called Bai Xiaochen forward. She immediately answered and stepped up nervously. As a hidden professional, she reminded herself that she could not embarrass herself too badly. Green energy began to gather around her as she released her power, creating a storm-like swirl of wind around her body. When the test result appeared, the instructor announced that Bai Xiaochen's attack ability was 31. Seeing the low score, Bai Xiaochen was frustrated and realized that the combat power of a support profession was truly too low. Someone nearby burst into laughter and mocked her, saying she had talked big, yet that was all the capability she had. He added that if he had awakened the assassin profession, his attack ability would definitely have exceeded 80. After that, the instructor called Gu Zhekyu next. Gu Zhekyu, a storm mage, stepped forward and activated Chain Wind Energy Missile. Blue wind energy gathered around him and struck the test target. His attack ability was measured at 72. Next came Zhao Yuan, an Earth Knight. He charged forward with Shield Armor Charge, crashing into the target with heavy force. His attack ability was recorded as 69. Then Chen Yong, a Heavy Hammer Warrior, launched Giant Hammer Smash. His powerful strike landed with explosive force, and his attack ability reached 84. Watching the results, Ye Fan noted that their attack abilities were all much higher than his, but even so, none of them had reached 100. Someone in the crowd said it was a pity that even a score of 100 could not break the test golem, meaning Teacher Lu's contribution points would not be given out. Another student disagreed, pointing out that there was still one hidden professional who had not tested yet. The others quickly realized he was right. The final hidden professional, the necromancer Fang Zhou, still remained. The students continued looking toward Fang Zhou, but several of them clearly did not believe he could do anything impressive. One blonde student mocked the others for counting on a necromancer, saying that Fang Zhou probably would not even be able to reach 10 points of attack ability. Another student laughed and agreed with him. The blonde student added that it was not even certain whether Fang Zhou's skeletons could stand up properly. Fang Zhou calmly asked if they were truly so sure he could not earn the 20 contribution points. The blonde student laughed even harder and asked what else he was supposed to believe. He then pointed at the test golem and arrogantly declared that if Fang Zhou could break it as well, he would eat the test golem right on the spot. Hearing this, Fang Zhou simply reminded him that he had said those words himself. The blonde student was briefly confused and asked what he meant. Fang Zhou then stepped forward and asked everyone to move back a little. Seeing this, the blonde student mocked him again, asking if Fang Zhou was afraid his test data would be too poor and everyone would laugh at him. Fang Zhou calmly denied it. A dark, terrifying aura began to spread around him as lightning flashed across the sky and black chains appeared in the air. He explained that the reason he asked them to step back was because the skill he was about to release needed to occupy a relatively large amount of space. In the next moment, multiple skeletons emerged behind him, surrounded by eerie green energy and rattling chains. Their glowing blue eyes and terrifying presence immediately silenced the crowd. The students stared in shock. One of them shouted in disbelief, asking if those were really 10 skeletons and whether Fang Zhou was joking. Another student remembered that a newly awakened apprentice-level necromancer could usually summon only 2 skeletons. Someone else wondered if Fang Zhou had already advanced to the level of a black iron mage. Even the instructor was stunned. He recalled that Su Xinyan, known as the most talented necromancer in history, had only been able to summon 5 skeletons when she had first awakened, yet Fang Zhou had summoned 10 at once. Seeing Fang Zhou standing before the test golem with 10 skeletons behind him, the instructor could not help wondering whether Fang Zhou's talent was actually even stronger than Su Xinyan's. Fang Zhou, however, remained calm. Inwardly, he felt fortunate that he had held back a little. Otherwise, the attention he attracted might have become even greater. Without wasting any more time, Fang Zhou gave the command to attack. The skeletons immediately rushed forward at incredible speed, surprising the watching students. One of them exclaimed in shock at how fast the skeletons were. The skeletons charged toward the test golem one after another, striking it with their bony fists. Their attacks landed rapidly, forcing the test value to rise step by step. The numbers jumped from 30 to 45, then to 60, and finally stopped at 65. The impact created a huge commotion, but some students quickly noticed that the final attack value was not especially high. One student admitted that 65 was already not bad, since many warriors could not even reach that level. However, another mocked Fang Zhou, saying that even after using so many skeletons, he had only reached that little value, proving that necromancers were still too weak. The blonde student laughed again and asked whether that was all Fang Zhou had. Only 65 points. He ridiculed him further, saying that on average, a single skeleton could not even reach 10 points of attack ability. Fang Zhou remained completely composed and told them not to rush, because this was only the beginning. The blonde student immediately questioned what he meant and asked whether Fang Zhou was still trying to put up a dying struggle. Fang Zhou raised his hand, his eyes glowing with eerie green light. If 10 skeletons were not enough, then he would simply make it 20. As his command fell, even more skeletons emerged around him, filling the area with a chilling deathly aura. The surrounding students were instantly shocked. They realized that Fang Zhou had actually been holding back earlier. Looking at the number of skeletons around him, they counted at least 20 and wondered whether there had ever been such a powerful necromancer in history. Bai Xiaochen watched the scene with a confident smile, feeling that she had known all along that Fang Zhou could definitely do it. The skeletons launched their attack again. One after another, they struck the test golem with incredible speed and force. The number on the golem's display rose rapidly, climbing past 70, then 90, and finally breaking through 100. The attacks continued without stopping, and the golem's body began to crack under the pressure. A violent explosion erupted across the training ground. Flames and shockwaves swept outward, forcing the crowd to shield themselves as the test golem's display shattered. For a moment, everyone fell silent. Then someone shouted in disbelief. Fang Zhou's score was not 65 at all. The test golem's tolerance limit had been broken through by him. The students could barely believe it. Fang Zhou had only just awakened, yet he had already pushed the machine beyond its limit. To them, he no longer seemed human. He seemed completely inhuman. The blonde student stood frozen, unable to laugh anymore. He stared at the shattered display in shock as the broken screen showed 999. Realizing that Fang Zhou had exceeded the numerical limit, he could only stand there speechless. Fang Zhou calmly picked up the broken head of the test golem and brought it in front of him. Since the blonde student had personally claimed that he would eat the golem if Fang Zhou broke it, Fang Zhou told him that he could eat it now. The blonde student stammered nervously, unable to answer. Seeing his fear, Fang Zhou added that if he did not want to eat it, that was fine too. However, his expression suddenly turned cold, and a terrifying pressure spread from him. With glowing purple eyes, he ordered the blonde student to disappear from his sight forever. The blonde student was frightened and immediately backed down. As he ran away from the field, he shouted that he would definitely make Fang Zhou pay next time. After the commotion ended, Bai Xiaochen hurried over to Fang Zhou with excitement. She said that he was far too strong and asked how he had cultivated, urging him to teach her quickly. Fang Zhou awkwardly replied that it was only normal meditation training. The teacher then approached Fang Zhou while clapping. He praised him, saying Fang Zhou had truly opened his eyes. Fang Zhou modestly replied that the teacher was flattering him. The teacher placed a hand on his shoulder and promised that he would definitely fight for Fang Zhou to receive a spot on the school's critically cultivated seed list. Meanwhile, inside the principal's office, the principal reviewed the awakening results. Out of 10,000 new students in the school, 9,103 had successfully awakened, while 897 had failed. The awakening success rate was approximately 91%. Among them, there were 85 rare professionals in total. The list included Earth Knight Zhao Yuan, Shanting Strings Bai Xiaochen, Storm Mage Gu Shiqiu, Demon Hunter Ye Fan, and others. The principal considered these 85 students suitable for direct entry into the school's 100 critically cultivated seed spots. However, when he reached Fang Zhou's file, he paused. Looking at the record of Fang Zhou's necromancer profession, he dismissed it as a class with no future and decided it would be better to leave Fang Zhou out. Inside the principal's office, the principal heard someone knocking and called them inside. Teacher Lu entered in a hurry and immediately began searching through a stack of student documents. The principal was surprised to see him and asked why he was there instead of teaching the combat class. Teacher Lu explained that he had an urgent matter to report. After searching for a moment, Teacher Lu found Fang Zhou's file. Fang Zhou was a necromancer, and Teacher Lu strongly recommended adding him to the school's seed list. The principal admitted that the necromancer profession possessed great potential. However, its full strength was extremely difficult to develop. Although Major Su Xinian was also a necromancer whose combat power was no weaker than that of other mages, she had only reached that level because a former legendary expert had personally trained and supported her. The principal therefore wanted to know what made Fang Zhou worthy of receiving such valuable resources. The principal also knew that Teacher Lu and Fang Zhou's parents had once been comrades in arms. Fang Zhou's parents were respected Federation heroes, but the seed list was extremely important. Being selected did not only provide resources, it also came with great responsibility. Teacher Lu explained that this was precisely why he had come. he handed over Fang Zhou's meditation and combat class reports. Fang Zhou had mastered the skeleton meditation method during his very first meditation class. In actual combat, he had also managed to summon more than 20 skeletons. Teacher Lu firmly believed that Fang Zhou's talent could allow him to create an entirely new chapter in the history of necromancers. After hearing this, the principal became interested. However, he decided not to make an immediate judgment. He wanted to wait until the simulated battlefield opened and see Fang Zhou's performance for himself. As he looked at Fang Zhou's file, the principal quietly wondered what kind of unexpected abilities the young necromancer would reveal. As Fang Zhou walked across the school grounds with the silver-haired girl, she curiously asked how he had managed to summon so many skeletons during his very first combat class. Fang Zhou casually replied that he had only summoned a few more than usual and did not consider it a big deal. The girl pointed at him and warned that being overly humble could also be considered a form of arrogance. Fang Zhou laughed awkwardly and insisted that he genuinely did not think his achievement was anything impressive. However, Fang Zhou could not reveal the truth to her. The power he had displayed during the combat class was only a tiny fraction of his actual strength. Compared to what he was truly capable of, summoning those skeletons was merely a drop in the bucket. Just as Fang Zhou and the girl were about to leave, someone suddenly called out for him to wait. They turned around and saw a confident red-haired student approaching them. The student introduced himself as Ye Fan and proudly declared that he had never been weaker than anyone throughout his entire life. After observing everyone in Class 1, Ye Fan believed that Fang Zhou was the only student worthy of becoming his opponent. Fang Zhou and the silver-haired girl stared at him in awkward silence. Fang Zhou then calmly rejected the challenge, saying that he had no interest in accepting a challenge from someone behaving like a delusional fantasy character. The girl also found Ye Fan extremely strange. Without giving him another chance to speak, she and Fang Zhou turned around and continued walking away. Ye Fan hurried after them while repeatedly telling Fang Zhou to wait. Ye Fan quickly stopped Fang Zhou and explained that he was not asking for a simple challenge. Instead, he wanted Fang Zhou to become his regular sparring partner. Fang Zhou was slightly surprised and asked why Ye Fan needed one. Ye Fan explained that after awakening the rare demon hunter profession, he had joined the Demon Hunter Scientific Research Group. During the research process, he needed a sparring partner with strength equal to his own so the researchers could continue studying and developing his profession. However, Fang Zhou saw no reason to cooperate with someone else's research. Hearing this, Ye Fan immediately offered him 10 contribution points in exchange for 2 weeks of sparring. He also promised to provide accommodation and meals during that period. The moment Fang Zhou heard the offer, he accepted without hesitation and shook Ye Fan's hand, declaring that it was a pleasure doing business. Ye Fan smiled, pleased that the rival he had chosen had agreed so easily. He then told Fang Zhou to come with him immediately. The silver-haired girl stared at Fang Zhou in disbelief and asked how he could agree to such a strange person so quickly. Fang Zhou calmly explained that 10 contribution points were a considerable amount. He also believed that the people waiting for him at home probably needed those points. As they watched Ye Fan walk ahead, the girl remarked that he was probably a wealthy second-generation young master because of how generously he had offered the reward. Fang Zhou immediately rejected that idea. He had already realized that Ye Fan was not spending his own wealth at all. The Demon Hunter Research Association had advanced those contribution points to him for the research. The silver-haired girl agreed that the members of the Research Association were indeed generous. However, she pointed out that the contribution points were only in advance, which meant Ye Fan would eventually have to repay them. Considering how carelessly he spent resources, she believed he might still be paying off the debt 20 years after graduation. Fang Zhou finally understood why Ye Fan had offered the reward so easily. After walking for a while, Ye Fan stopped in front of a large modern building and urged them to enter. He led Fang Zhou and the silver-haired girl into a spacious laboratory filled with advanced machines, research equipment, mechanical models, and experimental devices. Ye Fan proudly introduced it as the laboratory belonging to his research group. Fang Zhou looked around and was impressed by how well equipped the facility was. He realized that rare professions received exceptionally generous treatment from the Federation. A green-haired researcher wearing glasses and a white laboratory coat approached them. One of his arms was mechanical. He greeted them and introduced himself as Chen Qing-shen, the person responsible for the Demon Hunter Research Association. He was also a silver-level Gale Ranger. Fang Zhou politely greeted Professor Chen. However, while observing him, Fang Zhou immediately sensed something unusual. Even though Chen Qing-shen worked as a logistics researcher, Fang Zhou could feel the powerful aura of countless frontline battles surrounding him. Professor Chen explained that a senior human demon hunter had recently achieved the legendary rank in the Abyss Mystic realm. That powerful expert had successfully slain an Abyss Lord, displaying extraordinary combat strength. Because of that achievement, Huasha Military Academy had placed great importance on Ye Fan after he awakened the demon hunter profession. The academy had established a special scientific research group to study him and fully develop the potential of his rare profession. Professor Chen then turned toward Fang Zhou and revealed that he had already reviewed his files as well. He offered to establish a small research association specifically for Fang Zhou if he was interested. However, Fang Zhou awkwardly rejected the offer. After learning that the resources provided by such associations were only advances that had to be repaid, he had no desire to remain in debt for 20 years after graduating. Professor Chen did not force him and instead suggested beginning the actual combat research. He led Fang Zhou and Ye Fan into a large underground combat arena. The research team had already prepared detailed safety measures, allowing both of them to fight freely without worrying about placing their lives in danger. To help them display their full combat power, Professor Chen allowed each of them to select 3 pieces of combat equipment from the armory. As Fang Zhou observed Ye Fan preparing himself, he quietly evaluated his opponent. Ye Fan was clearly not weak. His great speed and powerful burst damage could prove highly effective against Fang Zhou's summoned skeletons, making him a troublesome opponent in close combat. As Fang Zhou prepared for the battle, he decided that it was time to use skill deduction to increase his combat power. A glowing green interface appeared before him, displaying his Necromancer abilities. Among them were Summoned Skeleton, Level 2 Bone Javelin, and Level 1 Bone Shield. Fang Zhou focused on strengthening his skills before facing Ye Fan. Meanwhile, Ye Fan removed his leather jacket and equipped a massive bladed bow along with protective shoulder armor. He confidently revealed that he had recently mastered the weapon mastery skill for the bladed bow. With his new ability, he believed that Fang Zhou would still be no match for him, even if Fang Zhou summoned 20 skeletons. Fang Zhou merely smiled at Ye Fan's confidence. That might have been true before, but after adding points to his skills, the result might be completely different. His status showed that he was a lower-level apprentice necromancer. His strength was 1.5, agility was 1.3, constitution was 1.3, and spirit was 2.5. He possessed the skeleton meditation method, Summon Skeleton, Bone Javelin, and Bone Shield. His Bone Javelin had already reached the mastered level, while Bone Shield had reached the proficient level. Fang Zhou then selected an apprentice staff and an apprentice robe from the armory. Both were ordinary gray-grade equipment produced through assembly lines. The staff slightly increased the effects of his spells, while the robe slightly